Hello. My girlfriend turned down my proposal, saying her career had to come first. Years later, she showed up single at my office while I was picking up my new wife for lunch. My name is Leo. I am 34, and I work as a civil engineer focusing on bridge maintenance projects around Rotterdam. My work schedule is steady but demanding, usually starting early in the morning and ending mid-afternoon unless inspections run long. I have lived in Rotterdam most of my adult life, and my routine is fairly predictable. Work, gym a few evenings a week, and quiet weekends either catching up on reading or meeting a few close friends from university. My girlfriend back then was Maya. She was 31 when all of this started unfolding, and we had been together for just under 4 years. For the last year of that relationship, we were living together in a small but decent apartment near the river. Maya worked as a corporate lawyer at a mid-sized international firm. Her job was intense, long hours, constant pressure, and she talked about partnership tracks and billable hours almost every day. From the outside, we looked stable. Shared bills, shared furniture, shared plans about where we might move once both of our careers progressed. The reason I am posting here is because of something that happened last week that dragged a very old decision back into the present in a way I never expected. To explain that properly, I need to go back a few years. Maya had always been ambitious. That by itself was never the problem. I respected people who took their work seriously since my own job is built around long projects and slow progress. The issue was that with Maya, everything eventually turned into a competition between her career and literally anything else. Dinners were moved because of client calls. Weekends disappeared into urgent case preparation. Even normal conversations somehow circled back to her firm politics and who was getting closer to partnership. I tolerated it for a while because relationships require adjustment, and at the time I genuinely believed the intensity would settle once she secured the position she wanted. Instead, it escalated. About 3.5 years into the relationship, I decided to propose. Not impulsively. I planned it carefully, mostly because I knew Maya valued appearances and milestones. I assumed she would appreciate the stability. The moment I actually asked is where things started to break in a way I did not fully understand until years later. I did not rush into proposing. The idea had been sitting in my mind for months before I actually bought the ring. From a practical standpoint, our lives were already merged. We had lived together for a year, our finances were organized, and most of our friends treated us like a permanent unit anyway. Maya also talked about long-term planning constantly, just not always in the way most people expect. She liked discussing where we might live in 5 years, which areas of the city were gaining property value, and how certain social circles could help with networking. Because of that, I assumed marriage would simply be the next logical step. I picked a quiet Friday evening. Nothing dramatic or public because Maya hated surprises that made her feel out of control. I cooked dinner at home. Nothing fancy, just something that felt normal. We finished eating, cleaned the kitchen together, and sat down on the couch with a glass of wine. That is when I asked. At first, she just stared at me, not shocked. More like someone processing an email they were not expecting to receive. Then she sighed. Not emotional. Not happy either. Just mildly irritated. Her first words were not what I expected. She asked if I had seriously thought about the timing. That already caught me off guard because from my perspective the timing was obvious. We were both in our early 30s and had been together almost 4 years. But Maya leaned back and started explaining it like I had just proposed a bad business decision. She said her career had to come first right now. Not eventually. Not temporarily. First. She talked about the firm, the promotion cycle, and how getting engaged would complicate things socially and professionally. According to her, people in her office would start making assumptions about maternity leave and long-term priorities. I remember sitting there holding the ring box while she listed reasons like she was rejecting a contract proposal. What made it worse was the tone. It was not regretful. It was annoyed. At one point, she actually said that if I understood how competitive her field was, I would not have put her in that position in the first place. That was the moment I realized we were not talking about the same future at all. I did not react immediately, mostly because the way Maya explained it sounded so calculated that I needed a minute to process whether she was serious. I asked her a simple question. I asked if she was saying she did not want to marry me at all, or if she just wanted to wait. That distinction mattered to me. Her answer did not make things better. She said marriage was something she might consider later once her position at the firm was secure and once she had more control over her schedule. Then she added that right now she could not afford the distraction of planning a wedding or adjusting her priorities around a husband. The way she said husband sounded almost like an inconvenience. I asked how long later meant. She shrugged. Maybe 5 years. Maybe more. It depended on how things developed at the firm. That answer told me more than she probably intended. 5 years would have put us close to 40. It also meant she expected me to keep the relationship exactly where it was while she focused completely on work. I told her that did not really sound like a partnership. Her response was immediate and sharp. She said I was being dramatic and that plenty of couples waited to get married. According to her, I was acting insecure because I needed some kind of symbolic reassurance. Then she said something that honestly changed the way I looked at the relationship. She told me that if I actually cared about her success, I would support her decision instead of putting pressure on her with outdated expectations about marriage. I remember sitting there thinking about how strange the conversation had become. I had asked someone I had lived with for a year to marry me, a pretty standard step after 4 years together. But somehow the discussion had turned into a lecture about ambition and sacrifice, where I was being framed as the unreasonable one. At that point, I closed the ring box. Not out of anger, more out of clarity. And once that clarity settled in, I made a decision that Maya clearly did not expect. Once the ring box was closed, the mood in the room changed quickly. Maya noticed it too. She asked why I looked so serious, but the question sounded more irritated than concerned. Like she expected the conversation to end with me apologizing for the timing and putting the ring away until it suited her. Instead, I asked her something very direct. I asked if she actually saw a future where we built a life together, or if she saw me as someone convenient while she focused on her career. She rolled her eyes immediately. That reaction told me more than her words. She said I was being overly sensitive and that adults understood how priorities worked. According to her, relationships had to adapt to professional goals, not the other way around. Then she added something that sealed the situation. She said that if I could not handle being patient while she built her career, maybe I was not mature enough to be with someone as driven as her. There was a certain tone to it. Not just dismissive, but slightly superior. Like she believed her career ambitions automatically ranked above anything I might want from life. That was when I stopped trying to negotiate the situation. I told her calmly that if marriage was something she might think about in 5 or more years, then we were not looking for the same kind of relationship. She stared at me like she had misheard. I continued explaining that I was not interested in staying in a holding pattern while she decided whether I fit into her long-term plans. For a few seconds, she said nothing. Then she laughed, not in a friendly way, more like she thought I was bluffing. She said I was overreacting and that couples did not break up over something like this. I told her we did. Since the apartment lease was under my name and I had been living there longer before she moved in, I told her she needed to start looking for another place. That was the moment her attitude changed completely. The calm, slightly arrogant tone disappeared, and the version of Maya that showed up next was a lot less controlled. The moment Maya realized I was serious, the conversation escalated fast. At first, she tried to flip the situation back on me. She said I was being impulsive and childish, like I was throwing away a 4-year relationship because I could not handle waiting a little longer. But the tone had changed. It was sharper now. I told her this was not about waiting a little longer. She had just told me 5 years minimum, maybe more, while expecting the relationship to stay exactly the same. That was not a compromise. That was an indefinite delay. She paced around the living room for a minute, clearly frustrated that the conversation was not going the way she expected. Then she started listing everything she had invested in the relationship. Time, effort, emotional support. The usual arguments people use when they want to guilt someone into backing down. I listened, but my mind was already made up. When she finished, I explained something very simple. If her career truly had to come before everything else in her life, then she deserved the freedom to focus on it without someone expecting a different timeline. And I deserved to build a future with someone who actually wanted the same milestones I did. She did not like that answer. At one point, she actually said that finding someone else at my age would not be as easy as I thought. That comment was oddly revealing. It was not about fixing the relationship. It was about convincing me I had limited options. I told her she had the weekend to pack her things. Since the lease and utilities were under my name and I had documentation showing I lived there first, the situation was pretty straightforward legally. I had already checked that earlier that year when we renewed the lease. She looked genuinely stunned that I had thought that far ahead. But the truth is I had started thinking about exit options the moment she told me marriage might be something she would consider in 5 years. The rest of that night was quiet. Maya slept in the bedroom. I took the couch. By Sunday evening, most of her things were gone. And just like that, a 4-year relationship ended. The breakup itself was surprisingly clean. There was no dramatic final fight and no long emotional speeches. Maya packed most of her things, called a friend to help move a few boxes, and left by Sunday evening. Before she walked out, she made one last comment. She said I would regret ending things once I realized how rare someone like her was. I did not respond. At that point, the conversation had already reached its logical conclusion. The next few months were quieter than I expected. 4 years is a long time to share a routine with someone. So naturally, there was an adjustment period. But in hindsight, the biggest difference was actually the absence of constant tension around Maya's schedule and priorities. My apartment felt calmer. Work stayed busy as usual. Bridge inspections, project meetings, and occasional site visits outside the city. Civil engineering is not the kind of job where you sit around overthinking your personal life all day. About 6 months later, I started dating again. Nothing serious at first. Just normal dinners, conversations, figuring out what kind of person I actually wanted to build a future with. One thing became very clear to me during that period. I was not interested in negotiating basic life goals anymore. If someone wanted marriage someday, great. If they did not, that was also fine. But I was not going to repeat a situation where a relationship stayed in indefinite suspension while one person decided whether it fit their career timeline. That clarity helped more than I expected. About 1.5 years after the breakup, I met Anna. She was completely different from Maya in ways that were obvious almost immediately. Anna was a project manager at an architecture firm in the city. Her schedule was busy too, but she approached life in a much more balanced way. Work mattered to her, but it was not the only thing she built her identity around. Our conversations were straightforward. No competition about whose career mattered more. No lectures about ambition. Just two adults figuring out whether they enjoyed building a life together. And eventually we did. But the reason I am writing this now has nothing to do with how my relationship with Anna started. It has everything to do with who unexpectedly walked into my office last week. Last week started like a normal Thursday. I had a site inspection early in the morning outside the city, so by the time I got back to the office it was already close to noon. Thursdays are usually when Anna and I meet for lunch because her architecture firm is in the same business district as my office. Around 12:15, I finished reviewing a maintenance report and sent her a quick message asking if she was ready to head out. She replied that she would walk over in about 10 minutes. My office building has a small reception area on the ground floor, so usually I just go downstairs and meet her there. It is easier than having her navigate the engineering department upstairs. I grabbed my jacket and headed down. When the elevator doors opened, I immediately noticed someone standing near the reception desk arguing quietly with the receptionist. At first I did not recognize her. It had been years. But then she turned slightly, and the voice clicked before the face did. It was Maya. She looked different, but not dramatically so. Same posture. Same sharp tone when she talked to people she thought were being unhelpful. The receptionist was explaining that she could not just walk into the offices without an appointment. Maya sounded annoyed, like the rule should not apply to her. For a second I honestly considered turning around and going back upstairs. There was no reason for me to be involved in whatever she was doing there. But then she noticed me. Her expression shifted immediately. The irritation disappeared and was replaced with something that looked almost relieved. She walked straight toward me like we had spoken last week instead of several years ago. Leo. Wow. I was hoping that was actually you. That was the first sentence she said to me after all that time. Before I could even respond, she continued talking. She said she had tried to look me up online and eventually found the company I worked for. She had been in the area for meetings and decided to stop by. Then she asked if I had a minute to talk. The timing of that question was almost perfect, because at that exact moment the front door opened again, and my wife walked in to meet me for lunch. Anna walked in through the glass doors carrying her usual tote bag and looking slightly amused, the way she does when she catches me checking my phone while waiting. She smiled at me first. Then she noticed Maya standing directly in front of me. Anna slowed down slightly, but kept walking toward us. She is the kind of person who reads a situation very quickly without making a scene about it. Maya also turned to look at her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I stepped slightly toward Anna and said something simple. I said, "This is my wife, Anna. We were just about to go to lunch." That single sentence changed Maya's expression more than anything else could have. The confidence she had walked over with faded almost instantly. She looked from me to Anna and back again, like she was recalculating something that had not gone according to plan. Anna greeted her politely. She is naturally calm in social situations, so there was no awkward tension from her side. Maya forced a quick smile and said hello back, but it was obvious she had not expected that introduction. Then she looked at me again. She asked when I got married. The question sounded more surprised than curious. I told her it had been a little over 2 years. She nodded slowly, like she was processing new information that conflicted with something she believed before. Then she said something that made the entire situation much stranger. She said she had actually hoped to talk to me because she had been thinking about how things ended between us. Anna glanced at me but stayed quiet. She has a good sense of when to let people reveal themselves. Maya continued explaining that a lot had changed in her life recently. Her tone softened in a way I had never really heard from her before. She mentioned that she was no longer at the same law firm. Then she added that the career path she had prioritized so aggressively had not turned out the way she expected. There was a pause after that. And then she said the part that made it very clear why she had come to find me. Maya looked directly at me when she said it. She said that over the past year she had started realizing that some of the decisions she made earlier in her life might not have been as smart as she once believed. The way she phrased it sounded careful, like she was trying to ease into a conversation she had rehearsed in her head. She explained that the law firm she had worked at for years went through a restructuring. Several senior partners left, promotion timelines changed, and the position she had been pushing toward was no longer as guaranteed as she once thought. According to her, the environment had become extremely competitive and unstable. Eventually, she left the firm. Now she was working at a smaller legal consultancy. Still a good job by normal standards, but clearly not the trajectory she had once built her identity around. While she was explaining all of this, Anna and I were just standing there in the lobby listening. Maya then shifted the conversation in a direction that made her real intention obvious. She said that losing the firm position had forced her to rethink a lot of things about life priorities, career, relationships, stability. Then she looked at me and said she had thought about our breakup more than once over the past year. Specifically, she mentioned the night I proposed. According to her, she had been under enormous pressure back then and had probably handled the situation poorly. Probably was the word she used. She said that at the time, she believed sacrificing everything for her career was the correct decision. But now she was not so sure anymore. There was another pause. Then she asked if we could talk sometime. Properly. Just the two of us. The suggestion hung in the air for a few seconds. Anna stayed calm, which honestly made the moment easier to handle. I answered immediately. I told Maya that I appreciated the apology, but my life had moved forward a long time ago. Then I gestured lightly toward Anna. I said the future I had wanted back then eventually worked out anyway. Maya nodded, but the disappointment on her face was impossible to hide. Maya stood there for a few seconds after I answered. It was clear she had expected a different response. Maybe not an immediate reunion, but at least some opening for further conversation. Instead, she was standing in a lobby with my wife next to me and a very clear boundary in front of her. She forced a small smile and said she understood. But then she added something that honestly sounded more like frustration than reflection. She said that if I had just been a little more patient back then, things might have worked out differently for both of us. That comment pretty much confirmed everything I already believed about how she viewed relationships. Even now, years later, she still framed the situation like the main issue had been my lack of patience. Not the fact that she treated a 4-year relationship like a temporary placeholder while she pursued her career. I did not argue. There was nothing left to debate. I simply told her that we had both made the decisions that made sense to us at the time, and that life moved forward. Anna squeezed my arm lightly at that moment, which was a subtle reminder of how different my life actually turned out. Maya looked at the two of us again, nodded once, and said she would not take up any more of our time. Then she walked out of the building. The whole interaction lasted maybe 6 or 7 minutes. Anna and I went to lunch like we originally planned. About halfway through the meal, she asked one simple question. She asked if I was okay after running into my ex like that. I told her honestly that I was completely fine. If anything, the conversation felt like confirmation. Years ago, I thought Maya rejecting the proposal had ruined the future I had planned. Now it is obvious that moment actually redirected my life in a much better direction. If she had said yes back then, I probably would have spent years trying to compete with her career for basic attention and commitment. Instead, I married someone who never treated building a life together like an inconvenience. And judging by the way Maya looked walking out of that lobby, I do not think she expected that outcome at all.